Okay, good day students. Today our lesson will be based on the CAPS lesson of circulation and respiration. So let's talk about blood circulation from the lungs to the heart. So when we're talking about circulation from between the lungs and the heart, we're talking about pulmonic circulation. So when you hear the word pulmonic, you must think of the lungs. And purely this is about getting oxygen into the blood and carbon dioxide out of the blood. And it's quite an important function to keep us alive, right? We need oxygen. Our muscles need oxygen, our organs need oxygen. So the lungs and the heart work together to bring oxygen into the body and remove carbon dioxide out of the body. So the heart pumps the blood around your body by rhythmic repeated contractions, and this is felt as your heartbeat. Now we refer to that as systemic circulation because it's not necessarily about the lungs or moving oxygen in and out of the blood, but it's about moving oxygen around the whole body. So part of circulation, we get the pulmonic circulation and we get the systemic circulation. We also get the coronary circulation, which is within the heart, but we don't really need to go into so much detail in grade 9. So one thing that you need to know is your heart is split into two, and we're going to look, well actually into 4 chambers, but into 2 halves, and we're going to look into it in detail on the next slide. But remember, when you are looking at your heart or an image of your heart, the right and the left hand side will be swapped around. Okay, imagine it on your chest. In your chest, you flip it around. The left hand side becomes the right hand side, the right hand side becomes the left hand side. The oxygenated blood flows from the lungs to the left side of the heart. So the left side of the heart is where we find oxygenated blood. Then the left side will contract and pump the blood out of the heart and into the aorta, which is the main artery, which then takes the blood away from the heart around the whole body. The blood also needs to come back to the heart, and we're going to talk about the structures that it does, it uses to do that. Okay, and the average human heart, just an interesting fact, beats at 72 beats per minute, and it will beat approximately 2.5 billion times during an average 66-year lifespan. Just an interesting fact. Okay, but let's get to the crux of the matter. Let's have a look at this diagram. Okay, I just want to take my highlighter and we can highlight some important things. Okay, actually let me just point. Okay, so if we're looking at the heart over here, I just want to make it quite clear that this would be the right hand side of the heart and this would be the left hand side of the heart, because it's switched around. We're looking at an image. We have 4 chambers over here. We have the atrium and an atrium on this side as well, and at the bottom we have a ventricle and another ventricle. Notice how the ventricles look more like V's. Okay, they are a little bit bigger. So the left side of the heart, as we spoke about just now, carries the oxygenated blood. It receives oxygenated blood from the lungs and takes it around the body. Then deoxygenated blood has to come back to the heart, and it comes into the right hand side of the heart. Okay, so we're going to choose a starting point. I just want you to imagine, even though it's not on this diagram, imagine up here, every time I refer to up here, there's lungs up here, because your lungs are above your heart really, or the blood flows out of your heart towards your lungs is basically what I'm trying to say. So the heart is the primary function of pumping the blood, and the lungs receive the blood. Okay, so what's the lungs' role in circulation? The lungs' role is to remove carbon dioxide by breathing out, by respiration, breathing out the carbon dioxide and then breathing in oxygen to put the oxygen back into the blood. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to pick up a spot in the heart and we're going to start there. You can start anywhere. I'm going to start at the left atrium, which is over here. Let me take it. my highlighter or my little laser so you can see. So when the blood is in the left atrium, the blood would be oxygenated, and usually in diagrams oxygenated blood is shown as blue. I swapped them around, as red, and deoxygenated blood is blue. Okay, so if you see a diagram of a heart and you see blue and red, it's not because your blood is blue, it's just because this is how we show it diagrammatically. Okay, so the blood that's in the left atrium, we'll talk about where it comes from when we do the whole cycle, but the blood that's in the left atrium moves into the left ventricle. Okay, now it needs to move through a little valve, and we call this valve the mitral valve, okay, or mitral valve. When the blood moves down into the left ventricle, it builds up energy to be pumped out of the heart. The left ventricle then contracts and sends the blood out of, remember it's oxygenated blood, out of the heart in this big blood vessel over here. This blood vessel carries oxygenated blood. It's very thick walled. It's called the aorta. Okay, the aorta. There's the label over there. The aorta will carry the oxygenated blood right around the body. It splits into smaller arteries, into smaller arterioles, into capillaries. We're going to talk about those blood vessels on the next few slides. So the blood goes around the body, down to the toes, down to the fingers, the knees, the hips, everywhere, different organs, and the oxygen in the blood is then deposited into these different organs, cells, tissues. Okay, these organs, cells, and tissues, they go through metabolic processes, cellular respiration, and they use up this oxygen that's in the blood, and they release carbon dioxide, making the blood deoxygenated, because it's now full of carbon dioxide and not oxygen. The blood then needs to come back to the heart. The blood comes back to the heart much slower because it doesn't have a heart in your toe pumping it back up. The heart has got the muscles and pumps the blood. So when the blood leaves the heart, it has a lot of energy, it's moving quite fast at quite fast pressure. But when it comes back quite slowly. So it comes back in a structure called a vein. Okay, a vein is a blood vessel that carries deoxygenated blood. So the blood is then going to move back towards the heart in veins or baby veins called venules that become veins that become the main vein in your body. And you can see this over here, this thick blue vein, and this is called the vena cava. We get the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. These veins are below the inferior, below your shoulders, or superior, above your shoulders. These vena cavas bring the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. It enters the heart at the right atrium. Okay, from the right atrium, the blood moves down into the right ventricle. It's still deoxygenated. So what does it need to do? It needs to go fetch oxygen now. So it's going to leave the heart. The only place that can get oxygen is at the lungs. So it leaves the heart via the pulmonary artery. Remember I said pulmonary makes you think of the word lungs. Okay, so there's a little pulmonary valve here, which all these valves really prevent blood from flowing backwards. It leaves the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve and moves towards the pulmonary artery, or moves in the pulmonary artery towards the lungs. Okay, now the blood is deoxygenated. It needs to get oxygen, so it drops off its carbon dioxide in the lungs. We breathe out the carbon dioxide, we breathe in the oxygen, then the blood becomes oxygenated again. Okay, and then it needs to move from the lungs back into the heart. So now it comes back into the heart via the pulmonary vein. You see the pulmonary vein, and this blood is oxygenated and it moves back into the left atrium, and then we start again. So the blood moves from the left atrium through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, through the aorta, to the whole body, and then it returns to the body, to the blood, to the heart via the vena cava, enters the right atrium, moves from the right atrium into the right ventricle. We forgot to mention the tricuspid valve here. And then the tricuspid valve is between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And then the blood needs to leave again to go get oxygen. And it leaves via the pulmonary artery. Now remember, we spoke about the word pulmonary meaning lungs. Now artery normally carries oxygenated blood. It's the stronger blood vessel, the thicker blood vessel, moves blood faster. But the pulmonary artery is the only blood vessel that carries deoxygenated blood. The only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. All the other arteries carry oxygenated blood, but the pulmonary artery carries the deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The pulmonary vein is then the only vein that carries oxygenated blood because it brings the oxygenated blood back to the heart. Okay, we're going to go through this process one more time. Let's start somewhere else so we check our skills. So let's talk about the right atrium. So the blood enters the right atrium. I forgot where it enters from, so we're not going to talk about that. Just say it enters the right atrium. It then needs to move down into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. What type of blood is it? It is oxygenated blood because it's on the right hand side of the heart. It then moves to sorry, I meant to say I mixed them up. It is deoxygenated completely. I hope you corrected me there. It's deoxygenated blood. So I was like, why is the blood moving to the lungs? It needs to move to the lungs because it needs to go pick up oxygen. So the blood in the right atrium, let's start again. The blood enters the right atrium. It is deoxygenated. It moves into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. This blood is deoxygenated. It wants to become oxygenated, so it leaves the heart via the pulmonary artery and it moves towards the lungs. At the lungs, the blood will then become oxygenated again and it will return to the heart through the pulmonary vein. It will enter the heart at the left atrium, move through the mitral valve and then leave the heart via the aorta. There is another valve here which is called the aortic valve. That is just the valve at the start of the aorta. And the blood will then move in the aorta to the rest of the body where it will drop off the oxygen. It will then return to the heart via the vena cava as deoxygenated blood and once again enter the heart at the right atrium. So if we talk about just structures, we say right atrium through tricuspid valve, right ventricle, through the pulmonic valve, pulmonary artery to the lungs, from the lungs back to the heart via pulmonary vein, in the pulmonary vein into the left atrium, from the left atrium through the mitral valve into the left ventricle through the aortic valve to the body. So it is going to be good for you to try pause at this moment or stop or refer back to a diagram and see if you've got this process. We went through all the labels in this diagram. There is one label that it could have had, and that's that middle section of the heart that keeps the blood separated in the different chambers. That keeps the deoxygenated blood from mixing with the oxygenated blood, and that is called the septum. The heart is also covered in a layer called the pericardium. Okay, then I was talking about arteries. So what do the arteries do? The arteries transport blood away from the heart. So the pulmonic artery, the aorta, that's going away from the heart. It usually carries oxygenated blood except the pulmonary artery. It has thick, muscular and elastic walls to handle high pressure. Remember, it's coming from the heart, so it's at high pressure. And then the pulmonary arteries carry deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. Remember, the pulmonary artery being the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. A vein transport blood towards the heart. The blood will be deoxygenated except in pulmonary veins, because that's when it's oxygenated. It has thin walls, a large lumen, that's the empty space, and it has valves to prevent backflow, because remember the blood is moving quite slowly, so there need to be valves there to keep the blood moving in one direction. The pulmonary vein, however, carries oxygenated blood because it's moving to the heart but from the lungs. Okay, so transport blood towards the heart will be a vein, away from the heart will be an artery. And then we get capillaries. So capillaries form networks around body cells. So capillaries you will find at the end of all your arteries and veins. Your arteries and veins narrow and become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually become little baby capillaries. And these capillaries are in the tissue. And these capillaries have thin walls. The walls are only one cell thick, and they allow easy diffusion of oxygen, nutrients, and waste between the blood and the cells. And they are the connection between an artery and a vein. So an artery comes from the heart, it diffuses down into the cells and the organs, and it becomes the capillaries, and then the capillaries become veins again when they go back to the heart. So if we had to compare them, the arteries move away from the heart. They are carrying mostly oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery, there's the exception, and they have thick muscular walls at high pressure. Veins carry blood towards the heart, mostly deoxygenated. They have thin walls, valves, and the blood is at low pressure, except pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood. And then capillaries connect the arteries and veins. They carry both oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, because this is where the exchange happens between oxygen and carbon dioxide. And they're only one cell thick in their walls, because the gas needs to diffuse through their walls. So I just want us to take this moment to reflect back on the major structures of the heart. So remember, we have 4 chambers. We have the right atrium, the right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Right hand side of the heart mainly carries, or only carries, deoxygenated blood. Left hand side of the heart carries oxygenated blood. We learned 4 valves: the pulmonic valve, the aortic valve, the mitral valve, and the tricuspid valve. Okay, we spoke about the aorta, which is the main artery leaving the heart. We also have the pulmonary artery leaving the heart, going to the lungs. Then the main vein is the vena cava, returning to the heart. And then you also get the pulmonary vein, which is returning to the heart from the lungs. Okay, remember, the blood flows from the left hand side out of the heart to the body, and then back into the right hand side of the body, of the heart from the body, and then it needs to go to the lungs. So familiarize yourself with the different chambers, the different structures, and then the flow, and then see if you can start at different parts in the heart and describe the blood flow. Right, all the best.